As we're moving into October, it's hard to believe that nearly 2 months have gone by since those most recent floods. Earlier in the show, we talked about all the relief efforts still going on for this year's flooding. Neil Melancon now joins us for this week's Bottom Line. And Neil, those relief efforts are still going on because a lot of people, especially in South Louisiana, are still trying to pick up the pieces from this most recent flood.
They are, and literally they're trying to pick up these pieces. Last week, we showed you that the crew from the Walker FFA was delivering some flood relief to people through Farm Bureau's hay clearinghouse. Now that's winding down, but there are still a few folks who are still feeding their cattle from hay as those pastures continue to green up. You might remember Jerry Sibley from that FFA story, the oil field worker who helped deliver and unload that hay. His daughter Amy has the horses that Jerry used to rescue more than 200 head of cattle caught in the August flood. Amy is a member of the Cross Creek Cowboy Church in Zachary, which also coordinated hay donations for many of its members. Pastor Josh Morris said new hay was necessary due to the filth in those flood waters.
I mean, people lost gobs of hay that is normally set on the ground in a pasture somewhere. Well, that pasture got flooded, and so that hay got full of mud and junk and nasty stuff, you know, coming from the sewage and all that jazz. And so, you know, they lost all their hay.
Morris said he saw losses on a massive scale, but even the small losses are devastating for this area.
I've heard of people losing as many as 300 head of cows. Some not as much, I mean, but you know, some families are only farming, the average family in Louisiana is farming 35 to 40 head. And so you lose 10 to 15 cows in a flood, and you've lost that's pretty good substantial, not just the cows, but calves.
Now, as I went to talk to Amy Sibley, it was originally about her horses, which were used to rescue those cattle. As we toured Livingston Parish, though, it became clear why this disaster has hung around for so long in so many of these rural areas, even in neighborhoods. There are very few resources for many of these folks who aren't living in much better conditions since immediately after the flood.
In this particular community that I'm standing in, people got 1.5 feet to 2 feet of water in their home, and they're still living in those homes. They've taken out the bare necessities that they could afford, but they're still sleeping on molded mattresses that were soaked and saturated. Their homes, they haven't been able to gut them because they do not have the funds or the means to do so. Families are needing medication because they're getting sick from being in these conditions, and they're asking people to help them. And simply, we can't provide some of the necessities.
The bottom line is we need that aid to help agriculture and regular people alike to get back on their feet. One estimate I saw is that 30 to 40% of businesses in Livingston Parish alone won't be reopening. That's a devastating economic impact that's going to haunt this area for many years to come. And Kristen, you know, talking to Amy, she had 2 horses in particular. One was used in that flood to rescue those cattle. From the flanks down, it had chemical burns, and that was just from the water. That's how nasty it was. The other that really showed the impact of this flood, it was in a pasture just feeding. The flood waters came in. 1,200-pound horse, the waters rolled that horse completely over a barbed wire fence, and it had cuts all down its side. And so, I mean, it's just, you know, tale of 2 horses really, but it just shows how bad this flood is.
It's amazing, you know, that from so many different things that people talked about, how damaging the floodwaters were, not just to homes, but like, for example, the Ag Center said, if you had a home garden that was sustained flood damage, you can't eat any of those vegetables. Now, who would have thought that? I wouldn't have, but,
yeah.
You know.
Yeah, it's just all that nasty water, and you don't think about it too much, but man, keep your kids out of that stuff for sure.
Oh, gosh. Well, it was a devastating event, and we're going to be cleaning this up for quite a while.
Absolutely.
Great story, Neil Melancon. Well, that does it for this edition of TWILA. Be sure to join us next week for 4-H Week. We'll be celebrating this service organization all week long. Plus, Carl Wiggers takes a look at some homegrown Louisiana ag patents helping our state grow. Until then, you can watch all of our stories online at twilatv.org, and be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For all of us here at TWILA, thanks for joining us. We hope to see you again right here next week.